Okay, hello everyone. I'm so excited that you all are here. Welcome to the first Setbacks in Medicine discussion. I'm very, very excited. My name is Madalena Conti. I'm a medical student in New York City, just finishing up my third year. And I am endlessly grateful to every single person who has joined today. Really, really grateful for you taking time out of your busy days to be here. And I am especially grateful to the incredible Robbie and Sukriti for being willing to be a part of this discussion with me today. Very grateful to Laura here, who has helped spearhead this project with me, and really the whole CP Solvers family for supporting this. So without further ado, what is the Setbacks in Medicine series? So this series is a space where we can get together to share stories of failures and setbacks in medicine. And in terms of the why, or the reasoning behind the series, everyone experiences setbacks in medicine, but these stories are rarely discussed and rarely talked about. And I believe we are doing ourselves a disservice by not being transparent about the setbacks that we all face. Before we get into it and to set the tone for the discussion, I wanted to open it up to you all. Why do you all think it's important to share stories of mistakes and setbacks in medicine? And I'll give a few moments for people to put their thoughts in the chat, and if anyone feels strongly, they can unmute and share their thoughts.
I can share my thoughts.
Please do.
I think that we learn not only from the things that we experience ourselves, but through listening to other people's experiences. And maybe like our setbacks are kind of the same, but in different shapes and forms, and we don't feel alone when we see other people maybe like struggling with the same kind of setback. And so this is why I think this is so powerful, because when you don't feel alone, then you're able to kind of organize your feelings and how to go through this and be better or do different the next time. And so that's what I think.
I 100% agree. And I think a lot of other people agree. I see in the chat, Hans has said to learn from the setback, my own and those from others. We can learn from other people's experiences. Rafa has also shared that when you learn from our setbacks and others, you realize that we're not alone in the process. Ravi mentioned nobody is perfect. We all make mistakes. Having the support structure in place helps you get through these moments and helps build you up. Gurbani said medicine is a team sport and we have to do this work together in community. I think these are all, and Hirsch said, I think trying to hide mistakes ultimately creates a culture that doesn't promote learning and improvement. I think these are all really, really important thoughts, and I thank each one of you for sharing that. And I completely agree. I think by not sharing failures, it contributes to worsening feelings of burnout, imposter syndrome, and the feeling that we're isolated when we have our setbacks. There are so many more comments in the chat mentioning really, really great points. So thank you all for doing that. So, I've also recently experienced my own setback, and what has helped me deal with it is first, not feeling alone, and second, learning from it. So a lot of themes that you all shared in the chat. And I'm hoping that today's discussion will highlight these themes, but ultimately we'll see where the conversation takes us. The topic of the discussion is perceived failures in medical school. And I'm really happy that we have a variety of levels of training here. In terms of the people discussing, myself, a medical student, Sukriti, a resident who's finishing up her intern year, and Robbie, who we all know and attending, and probably so many different levels of training in the chat and in the audience as well. And I really hope that these different perspectives can help us realize that despite setbacks in medical school or other training, we are all going to be okay. So without further ado, I wanted, Robbie, I would love to start with you. And what story comes to mind when you hear perceived failures in medical school?
Well, thank you for asking, and I would say that I'm more just struck by how many people are here how many people have chosen to turn their videos on today. And that's in large part to because of the tone that you're setting here. And I think that intro was just so powerful. The personal touch that this, a lot of it stems from your own recent setback, and how important this conversation is for everybody to hear. And for me, I was really glad that you asked what setback have you faced in med school, because I think that once the juices started flowing about setbacks for me, I feel like it started with one story and then another and then another and then another and then another. And by the time that I stopped thinking about it, I was like, wait, hold on. Like, my entire journey has been dotted with setbacks. And when I think about it, and I'm loose with the definition of what a setback is, I think I have one every day at least. Um, and the real question, I think, for me was, um, what setback stood out in medical school that lives with me today? And I struggled a lot to figure out how authentic and transparent I should be, because the biggest setback in medical school was probably one of the hardest experiences of my entire life, and continues to both shape me and scar me to this day. And I actually have a picture to share with you. So let me share. For all of you freaking out, oh my God, is he going to ruin this and show a schema? No, there will be no schema. I want you to see this. You guys see this picture?
Yep,
Yeah.
we can see it.
Yeah, that's my dad. This was this was actually intern year. And my dad passed away in the second year of my residency. And I wish I had more pictures to show you, but if I did, I don't think I'd be able to finish the story. My dad and I were very close. My mom is alive and well. I finished talking to her this morning, and I adore her. I literally spent 6 months of my life living with her. And the fact that she can tolerate my existence for so long means that our relationship is strong and healthy. But even she will tell you that I think because my dad and I are such similar personalities. He was a high school teacher who wanted to be a doctor but couldn't be for financial reasons. I was incredibly attached to my dad. And he was a principal of a high school in Lahore, Pakistan, where we grew up. And he was just adored by everybody. And when he passed, my second year of residency, I think there were thousands of students sending me messages on Facebook. Yes, used Facebook back then. And yeah, I mean, I lost the most important person in my life as a 27-year-old, and it's obviously processing that and reflecting on that is complicated. But the reason it's even more complicated, I'd say, is because of what I perceive to be my role in it. And I'm toggling the med school dimension of the story because it actually, he passed away when I was a resident. But it all began in college, when as a junior in college, I noticed that my dad started getting sick. He was ill and unwell and was lethargic and just not himself. He actually could no longer really do his job, and so my mom helped jump in and take care of his job for him. She also worked at the same school. She was a French teacher. And part of the reason why I can even begin to have a little bit of a conversation with Reza in French is he's trying to learn it. But I wanted to become a doctor. I was going to be a math major then. I was convinced that I was gonna teach math and that was gonna be my existence until my dad got sick, and that prompted a career path change that got me in med school. And in med school, I like worked my butt off. And I worked my butt off because I was like, oh my, I love this field. It's so interesting, but how can my dad suffer so much without knowing what's going on? He spent at least 3 or 4 years clueless to why he was suffering so much, why he didn't want to wake up in the morning, why he couldn't finish his work, why he felt so down, why he couldn't have a bowel movement, why so many things about his whole body were shutting down. And I was here in the US and he was in Lebanon with my mom. And I think many people on this call can relate to that phenomenon where there's this illusion that just because you're in the US, like you must know everything. And I spent a lot of medical school feeling like, wait, I've studied so much and so long, first, second, third, fourth year, and I can't help him. Like I couldn't. My mom would call every day, and she would tell me, and she would go to doctor after doctor and after doctor, and nobody would be able to figure it out. And yet I felt this heavy weight that my dad is sick. Nobody has any idea what's going on with him. He's slipping before our eyes, and I can't. I don't know what's going on with him, and it's crazy because I know how odd that sounds. It sounds like wait, what? You're a fourth year medical student. How could you be responsible for coming to clarity about your loved one's suffering when nobody else can? And that's why I was a little uncertain to share a little bit of this story with you. And I know we'll talk a little bit more, but it made me realize like all my failures, all the things, all my setbacks that have dotted my career have a similar theme to them. Like, well, wait, what? You missed a case of ischemic limb, but nobody else thought of it. And a lot of people miss it. Or wait, you failed that exam. Well, 3 other people failed it. And yeah, I don't come here with a polished, prepared conclusion or reconciliation of this, but throughout medical school, I felt the heaviness of the suffering that the person who I loved the most was incurring, and I felt this tremendous pain throughout the entire experience of not being able to help at all, and feeling small and inadequate, and yeah, and heavy. I feel like I've rambled a lot, as I always do, and I smile now, honestly, partly because I know that I'd love to reflect with you and not at you, but I smile now because I get so much inspiration and joy from even sharing the story out loud, because it shaped me to be a much I don't know, it shaped the suffering that those years laid upon me have shaped me to be a much happier human being now, I think. But yeah, I know I literally was like, hey, Madalena, we should have this be a dialogue and not a monologue. And I rambled for like 10 minutes or something.
No.
So I will stop there, and I'd love to reflect with you.
I think I just can't thank you enough for opening up and sharing that. I think it goes without saying that everyone in this call just really heard that and felt that and appreciate you for sharing that. So thank you so much. I wanted to ask, you talked about this kind of weight that you felt when this occurred, and the added weight of you being in the US, your family being in another country, which I personally don't have that experience, can't imagine, but I know probably some people on this call do. I was wondering if you could share anything that comes to mind, like what helped make that weight a little bit lighter?
Yeah, I think the truth is that I don't think anything really made it lighter when it was happening. I think it was a consistent sense of falling short of something. Um, and I think it was a relief when, a couple of years after, I think it was my intern year in that picture that I just showed you, where it became much more clear what he had. He had Parkinson's disease, and his pre-motor phase was so protracted and so prolonged. He didn't have any motor symptoms for a long period of time. And he started to get the classic symptoms. And I think it was only then that I think I got really any kind of relief from that heaviness. But to get at your question an even further level, like, what does it feel like afterwards? And it's so enlightening to realize now how excessive it was to carry that as a personal weight. You know how how understandable it is, like how I would probably do the same thing if it happened to me again. But I can now see that the setback really, and the failure really was something that I could never really overcome. And it's got me to wonder now, as we continue to experience micro and macro setbacks, can any of them really be overcome? And so I don't really think I felt any better until there was clarity. But I think what has happened from that is the sense that the development of this tool to realize that I can pick myself up much faster now than any time before, from walking down the path in the tunnel of realizing that setback didn't happen because I didn't know enough or didn't do right, um, or I'm deficient in some way, shape, or form. That setback happened because I'm growing and evolving. And when I look back on it, it will have defined the path that I'm on now. And there's still, don't get me wrong, it's not like I can hit a button and do that. But that journey, I think, is so much more streamlined because of the fact that I couldn't see for many years how I just um, couldn't do that then.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is so important. Like, not for so many setbacks, with the different levels of intensity of the setback, to some extent, there's no moving past it and leaving it in the dust. It's part of your story. It gives you resilience, and there are things to help you, move through it, but you never just leave it behind. Thank you so much for just sharing all of this. Thank you.
Yeah. I would say the final thing I'd reflect with you is it's like in many ways, I think we really are the sum total of what we call our setbacks. Like I think that's what I know it's so hard for me to be like, oh yay, I'm a doctor. Like that just seems like that seems such a core part of my identity. I don't celebrate that or think about that a lot, but I do celebrate overcoming the things that I've had to pick myself up from. Like I smile now when I think of my dad, and I smile now when I realize, oh wait, this is a patient with an ischemic limb and I need to act fast. Or I smile now when I actually can pick up and dissect a patient who actually has a migraine and not a stroke, and spare them the contrast that causes problems. And I think that yeah, what brings me joy now is not necessarily celebrating all the things that went well, but celebrating the things that are going well when they didn't in the past. And yeah, I think you saying that has made me realize that.
Yeah. Maria messaged me saying that she has a comment related to this or a story related to this. Maria, did you want to share something?
Hi, yeah. I was very moved by Radley's story. Oh, am I muted? Do you hear me? Yeah. Okay. But I think everybody was moved, and I think that's the power of good stories with good people, is that they're universal. So the thing that happened to Robbie is something that I think happens to a lot of us. And I just want to share real quickly that it's something that happened to me as well. I can't cry because I'm actually doing my makeup. It's something I'm not like very loud about, but because I think I'm still like processing it. But when I was in second year of med school back in 2016, it's very different in Guatemala. So assume I wasn't in med school at all. My brother, who I'm very close to, his birthday is actually tomorrow, and I'm missing his celebration. But he had started having like generalized weakness very fast. He drove himself to the hospital and didn't leave for like the next 2 weeks. He was in that time he was diagnosed with GBS, Guillain-Barré syndrome, and I was actually in the nervous system in med school, and it was such a whirlwind for me to have my brother suffer a disease that I had only learned in textbooks. It felt really weird, but I think everybody understood. I was like very young in the process of med school. I was still learning about it. Still felt really bad to not be able to do anything at all, or like help anything, or like answer any questions. And I think it really contributed to my neurophobia at the beginning. But you know, Guillain-Barré, he got better. Everything moved on. And then in 2019, I got this phone call, and my brother was in the hospital again with weakness. It was worse than the first time. And at that point, I was in 5th year of med school. And everybody was looking for me for answers, and I didn't have any answers. I have a family member who's a doctor who was with us in the first time. The second time, who's on a trip, so he wasn't there. I rushed myself to the hospital, and with my sister, we're very different. She's like very emotional, crazy, very loud. She was crying, and I was just trying to hold back like all my feelings, because it was like my responsibility, right? I was the one who had the answers, and I had no answers. I was like, what is this? And at the end, like, he was diagnosed with CIDP months later, with like tons of tests, tons of very difficult moments for like my family, my brother especially, and for me as well. At that moment, I was like, neuro sucks. I'm never gonna do this. Nobody wants to go to a neurologist. Everybody scares of them because it's so scary to think that you might lose something that is such a part of who you are. My brother was always an athlete. He like, soccer was his life. He was the one who was at the gym every day for weeks. That was his life. And then to see him in a wheelchair, to feel sort of responsible for not acting fast enough, I just said no to everything that was neurology, right? And then 3 years later, I want to become a neurologist. And that story, that was so hurtful for me. I'm ruining my makeup. No, but really, how hurtful it was to see him. You know, he got better. CIDP is actually one of the diseases that, you know, it's not that bad on the long term. So he's better. He's at the gym every day again. And he just redefined who he is. And I got to redefine who he was. And it taught me so much of how we define ourselves as a person, and how I define myself as not athletic. Because I always thought, you know, if somebody has to get this disease, it was me. I'm like, I read all the time. I don't move. I hate the gym. Like, why him? Like, why the athletic person, right? And now I love neuro. Now I see a passion for myself in neuro. I see like how I can work with these people who are so resilient and get to redefine themselves every day. So I am not as Robbie. I don't get that excited about being a doctor. I'm still trying to process that type of my personality, but I am excited about neurology. I'm working with people who get to, just become a new person. And that was just short.
No, Maria, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think again, what really hits me when you share that is just again the resilience that you've had going through that with your whole family. And I think what's an added layer to that is your journey with neurology and how understandably that really pushed you away from that, intensified the neurophobia, and then almost like a full circle has come around to that. And that's just is very beautiful. And I just thank you so much for sharing that. Is there anything that you wanted to share that helped you lift part of that weight during that process?
I'm really bad at handling anything. Like I'm really, really, really bad, but I'm like the youngest of my siblings. And so I think that's why, because like they're the responsible ones. They're the ones who drove me everywhere. They're the ones who paid for everything. I had to just like show up, be there, not do anything. And when that happened, like my whole family dynamic changed a lot. My sister who loves to have like the power, my brother who's like super like the strong person who wants to protect us all, and me who I'm like the smart one, but at that time I didn't know anything about that. And just it helped me a lot to, as I saw my brother like reshape who he was as a person. I think we all reshaped who we were. And I think just being open to, I'm really strong about not defining ourselves. You get so attached to that feeling of I am this person, I am supposed to be this person. And when difficult moments show up, it's very hard to let go of those feelings and like those dynamics and those personality traits. And just, I think at the end of the day, what defines you is not those things, not being smart, not being capable, not being like the responsible one, but just being honest with who you're becoming and what you're feeling, and being honest about that with everyone. I remember I cried all the time, like I am the biggest crier. And like my brother used to kick me out of his room, and I was like in my PJs, and like it was a hospital where I knew the other doctors, and I was just there in my hospital. And I remember like my surgery attending was there, and I was just like eating breakfast, and he's like, Maria, what's wrong? And I was like trying to be professional, but I was like, I was just crying. And like to this day, every time he sees me, he's like, how's your brother? Like people are human, and it's okay to not be like in that moment. I could have been like the very cold, and I wanted to be a surgeon at the time, so I had like a very strong relationship with this person. I was like, I had to be strong, calculating, meticulous, and I wasn't. I was like a very emotional being, and I think that was okay as well, just not getting attached to your preconceptions or preconception of your ideas.
Yeah, I think we can all learn from that, definitely. Thank you so much, Maria, for sharing that. I would love to see if Sukriti, if you wanted to jump in and share, a setback that you've had in medical school or beyond.
Thanks, Madalena. Before I share mine, I think just listening to Robbie and Maria, I wouldn't use the word inspiring, because I feel like it's a lot more than inspiring. But and I think the part of the story that I guess moves me the most is that it was a setback in their lives, and it did shape who they were in terms of it's like we talk about in medicine, like the branching point, in that Robbie went from math to embracing medicine, and Maria went from embracing neurology. But I think not just that branching point, but to do it on a daily basis when you have a patient that you don't know what that patient has. I think just being a doctor in itself, when you don't know what your patient has, puts you in such a vulnerable position. it must be so much harder when you've had a family member, and I'm sure there must be a lot of people on this call and you know, doctors who've had a family member go through a chronic illness or a sudden illness. And I think to do that in the context of that, it must be, I think it's very moving, and I think all of us can draw strength from that. So thank you for sharing it. In terms of my setback, I think when we spoke, it took me back, and I was telling Robbie and the CP solvers before the call that I was going to transition to second year. Kind of took me back to my transition in medical school. And at the time I was moving from a place called Bombay. So I moved to the US from India. I lived in a place called Bombay, and I was moving to Bangalore to start medical school. And even within India, there's just from region to region, there's a lot of differences in terms of cultural nuances, language, and I think there was a lot of unfamiliarity in terms of just starting medical school. You know, the things like the style of teaching was very different when you transition from high school to medical school. And in addition to that, you know, and I think everyone will relate, we had to assimilate a lot of information very quickly. So I feel like my biggest setback came in the form of not being able to adequately handle the stress, or that I perceived that I couldn't handle the stress. And that was kind of difficult for me, especially in terms of when I started, and when I talk about things like style of teaching and you know, having all this information thrown at you, I started cramming a lot for my exams, and so my whole study style was just cram and then regurgitate. And in that process, I didn't really understand a lot of the concepts in medicine, and kind of hindered my learning from both learning and also enjoying medicine in itself. It kind of became a chore. And the other was that the language was different for me. Although we were taught in English, but you know, just interacting with your peers, interacting with the patients, it kind of put me in I felt uncomfortable, like it was hard for me to find my own place in medical school. So I think one of the ways that I overcame that was by starting to draw. So I started to use illustrations to break down some of the medicine for myself. It made it easier for me to understand. I started enjoying medicine. And then, and feel free to like cut me off because I feel like I'm also going off in a monologue, but I started enjoying it. It became fun. It helped me de-stress because it was like a hobby. And then, you know, I got more time to kind of, as the learning became easier, I got more time to focus on other things. So I started to look at, you know, how I could learn the language, the local language. So I started to talk to my peers, and then I started learning the language. And as I started learning it, it kind of became easier and easier, as anything does when learning any new skill. So that was kind of how I dealt with that situation. And I think kind of made med school over the years much easier for me. And kind of when I look back now, it kind of made residency, the transition from med school to residency, much easier for me. Although like Robbie said, I don't think the situation itself became easier, but our response to that situation became better. And every time we're able to deal with that when it comes up, and again, frequently.
So Kriti, what an incredible story. I think what stands out to me is I think as everyone who's gone through some kind of medical training, I think we can all relate to the difficulties in schooling of the cramming, regurgitating, and there's, you know, it's not always enjoyable. I think CP Solvers is beautiful in that you know, we bring the kind of the love for learning back into it. But I think it's inspiring how from that difficulty you found this beautiful passion of yours that I can say has, clearly helped you, but helped so many other people, from all the illustrations on the website, that I've seen. It has made me, using that material, love to do it more. So that passion that you found that has allowed you to enjoy learning has, personally for me, allowed me to enjoy learning more. So you have spread it to at least one, and I would imagine many, many, many people through that gift. So just know that you've had the ripple effects, I guess. So thank you. I'm curious, how do you, with your busy intern year and residency, is art, and do you still use that outlet?
Yeah, I think whenever it has been much easier, it has been a little more difficult to find time to do it. But I think every time I kind of if I have a bad day, that's something that I know, well, it doesn't fix it, but kind of helps me center myself again. And that kind of helps me then, if there's a problem to be fixed, kind of centers me so I can think about it. And then, yeah, I think it's something that I turn to. It's like ice cream, or chocolate, or your favorite food, your favorite movie, your favorite book that you turn to when you're having a bad day, or just like a hot cup of coffee. So I think that's what art, specifically medical art, has become for me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Sukriti. And again, I think through that difficult transition you've had, you found this gift and have spread it with so many other people. And I think so many people are grateful for that, including myself. So thank you. I actually have a story to share that's related to Sukriti's, and that it's related to like difficulties of academics in third year. So if it's all right with you guys, I'll kind of jump in and share that as well. So just as a summary, my setback has to do with standardized tests and rotation grades during third year of medical school. And I will explain what occurred, but I want to focus more on what the setback felt like and continues to feel like, rather than on the specifics of grading. And the reason for that is grading systems are different in all different training programs, medical schools, different parts of the world, but the self-doubt and disappointment that resulted from this setback for me is likely universal to so many trainees. So in terms of what happened, so this will be familiar to medical students in the United States. So for each rotation or clerkship, our overall grade combines scores from shelf exams, clinical evaluations, case presentations. And the shelf exam for my internal medicine rotation, which is what I want to go into, was less than stellar, bringing down my overall rotation grade to a pass, even with strong scores and other components like clinical evaluations and case presentations. In the medical school I attend divides overall grades into honors, high pass, pass, fail. And it is a significant setback that I got a pass in the rotation I want to go into. For med students not in the US who may have different grading systems, the short takeaway is that I basically got below the average grade in the rotation I want to go into. And at first, this may not seem like a big deal. I passed, better than a fail. But I've talked with career advisors who made it clear that this is a significant setback, and one that will make future goals I aspire to a little bit more difficult. And I do acknowledge that I have a lot of privileges as a US medical student. But talking with career advisors, this will be a barrier to residency programs looking at my application and things like that. But as I mentioned, I don't want to focus on the specifics of grading, but rather on how this setback felt, because what is universal here is the self-doubt that so many learners in medical education face, and not the grading systems. And it's definitely not easy to talk about feelings of self-doubt, but I want to share this because what helped me is not feeling alone. And maybe my story will help someone else who's going through something similar not feel alone. Before I say anything further, I do want to just say up front that I take full responsibility for how I performed on the shelf exam and in the rotation. I don't intend to place any blame on the grading system in my medical school or anyone else. This is all kind of my responsibility, basically. So how did this setback feel? Well, initially I felt shocked. The news of my low grade on my shelf exam and then subsequently on my overall rotation just really shook me. It shook the way I viewed myself as a student, and it caused significant self-doubt. The grade, the way I perceived it, indicated that I underperformed, that I'm below average, that I was basically like scraping by the rotation. But that's not how I saw myself. In fact, I saw myself as, I felt very confident during the rotation. I learned a lot. I felt that it had overall gone really well. I considered myself a strong med student, so it was just kind of a shock to how I saw myself. And then after the initial shock faded, I started thinking about the future. So I was fearful about how this would impact future opportunities for me. As someone who plans on matching into residency with my partner, who's on this call, I was fearful that I would hold my partner back, that it would prevent us from reaching goals we had talked about together. And with this concern about how it would impact my future, just came this disappointment, embarrassment, and self-doubt. I never doubted what I was capable of. I knew that I was capable of so much more, but I doubted how I balanced priorities during the rotation. I was disappointed because I knew I was capable of better, and I was really frustrated by how this grade would cause others to perceive me. I knew I was more than a grade, but I was concerned how other people would view it. And after a few weeks had passed, I felt that I had made peace with what had happened. I had cried it out. I cried in my room. I cried on the subway on the way home. I cried on walks. I met with career advisors. I talked about this to my partner, to my roommates, to my friends. I had accepted that this was a setback, but I knew that, I have a lot of strengths, and I felt good about leaning into my strengths. I was ready to move on. But I didn't get, past it so quickly. Over time, I would have, and still continue to have, these kind of waves of disappointment, basically. So I would, be on a walk or driving home and just get these waves of disappointment, frustration, fear about how this would affect my future. And these waves are happening much less frequently now, but they very much still occur. So I would say that I have not gotten past the setback, but I'm working on moving through it. So that's, kind of how this setback felt. But I did want to share some strategies that are helping me move through it, because I've done some reflection and have come up with some things. Before I do, I'm happy to jump in, but I just wanted to pause there to see if anyone has anything to say.
How do you feel right now?
Good to talk it out. Yeah.
Yeah. It's incredible for me to sit back here and wonder what you've done with that setback. And it's hard not to conjecture, at least that's why we're here today, in large part. But I'm curious, how has your passion for your goals changed?
Let's see. I think it's how the passion for my goals changed. I think it's really distilled my interests, and has really made me stop to think about what I need to move forward, and what helps me kind of get through these things. Yeah, it's because I know what I'm capable of and that I have strengths, it's made me lean into those a little bit, and almost wanting to prove this nebulous, I don't even know what words to call it, but like prove them wrong, whoever them is. I don't have a them, there's really no them. It's just a nebulous, like, I think if the them is like the difficulties and stressors of med school, like wanting to prove them wrong. So I feel like I did, it took a lot of time to reflect on what I learned from this. And the first thing is that there are people to help, and that I don't have to go through this setback alone. So once I found out about these scores, I immediately emailed career advisors, academic advisors, who I appreciated were very honest about what barriers I would face, but then also helped me with tangible strategies for, standardized tests don't go away. And so they helped me with coming up with strategies to approach those exams in the future. Another thing I learned was that for me personally, I need to give myself time to feel sad and to wallow. So as I said, I thought I had made peace with this, and then a few weeks later, I would be on the bus and it would just hit me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Madalena, how did you let this happen? So I've learned that before jumping to the next steps into the growth mindset, I just need to sit with it and cry it out, or just, feel the wallow a little bit. And then the third thing, kind of getting at your question, is I took away this kind of determination and clarity to move forward, and that the only option is just to go on and to keep trying. So despite frustration with exams, third-year difficulties, this profession is just too beautiful and too interesting to let a shelf exam or rotation grade kind of like make me question my capacity to contribute meaningfully. And that it's not going to define me. There will be plenty of future successes and future setbacks ahead of me that I will deal with. And then the last thing I learned was the importance of finding your people who you can lean on. So for me, that was my partner, who's here. It was my roommate, who I think joined for a little bit, my siblings, but then also it was the CP Solvers community. I think the CP Solvers has actually played a huge role in not feeling alone and supporting me, and I know so many other students through medical school and beyond. And I've actually reflected a lot on this. And I think the first reason for that is, that saying, no one knows how much, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So I think throughout medical school, there are just endless people sharing what they know. But it's not always clear how much they care. And it is so clear that the CP Solvers community cares about students learning and lifting other people up. And that has been a big reason why I haven't felt alone. The second part is kind of related to that, is just the kindness. I think parts of medical school can feel harsh and cold, and the kindness from this community has meant a lot to me. And then lastly is the celebration of I don't know. So especially standardized tests and rotations sometimes make you feel like you need to know everything. And this community provides really important reminders that it's impossible to know everything, and it's actually just, there's no value in shame when we don't know a diagnosis or make a mistake. But it was actually, there was a post on the RLR Patreon page, which you all should subscribe to, kind of about this, about there's no value in shaming for not knowing anything or not knowing a diagnosis, but rather letting that be a driver to keep learning each day. So just, yeah, in summary, the CP Solvers community has really been helped me not feel alone in this, and has supported, I know, a lot of people in a lot of ways. So
Gosh, it sounds like you would have missed out on a lot had you not gone through this experience.
probably.
I mean, you just listed about 9 things that you got from it. Incredible.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe your path to your goal, Madalena, pre this event may have been more linear, but I'm not sure that getting there more efficiently would have left you as fulfilled and as fully formed when you get there,
Yeah, no, definitely. I think what we've all shared, like from setbacks there can be a lot of growth, and kind of, Sukriti has shared just new passions that come from things like this. And so there is something to be taken away. I know a few people, Dhruv, you mentioned that you would like to share something. Do you want to unmute?
Sure. And I don't know if I've told this story before, and I've probably told it to a couple of you guys, but I think it's time for me to share it in public here. Had plans gone the way that they would have gone, I would have still been in med school / grad school right now without being a resident. I initially came in as an MD PhD student at my med school, and during the first couple of years, I thought, would want to combine work being both a clinician and a researcher. During the 1 year of graduate work that I did during my med school career, all of that kind of went to pot for multiple different reasons. And it eventually got to the point where I had an overt panic attack at one point. And I eventually realized that what I had loved about medicine and med school up to that point was being on the wards and being with patients, not necessarily being in a lab. And so hard as it was for me to admit that, yes, this initial path that I had set out on failed, I switched back. I restarted my 3rd year and eventually got to where I am right now. And it just goes to show that this is something that my mom had told me that one of her mentors had said to her at one point, is that there are very few decisions in life that are irreversible. And there are very few mistakes that can be made that are also irreversibly consequential in terms of getting you away from your goals. So I feel like the ultimately, I feel like what happened kind of was for the best, considering that I got myself away from an interest that I thought I had that really wasn't, and got myself towards an interest that I knew I wanted to stay interested in. So, and I guess it's just that your story of, you know, having that setback in terms of grades and possibly having a path closed off kind of reminded me of that time where I thought that, oh, the goal that I had was closed off. But in reality, maybe that wasn't really the true goal in the first place.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that and for sharing that. I think that's a constant, I think that's just really just very wise that, you know, we think we are reaching towards this one goal and then something doesn't go as planned and we think that door is shut, but maybe that leads us towards a goal that we would, or kind of a destination that we are, is more in line with our interests in the first place. So thank you so much for, you know, just sharing that out loud with all of us. I know I learned a lot from that, and I know a lot of people on this call appreciate that. So thank you. So it's at the hour. I really can't thank every single person on this call enough for showing up, turning your videos on, and just listening to all of this. I think so many people shared their experiences in the chat, you know, the people who unmiked, and I know other people messaged me and I'm sorry there wasn't enough time, but hopefully we can do this again. So just thank you, and especially to Robbie and Sukriti and Maria and Drew for sharing your stories out loud. I really, really appreciate all of you.
Can I share one last thing? I just want to show everybody something. I may not have it here, but because we were talking about it, I kind of had a hard week this week. And so I was talking about how I use art. So I just want to, I think as we conclude the hour, just tell anybody who's also had a hard week this week that, you know, you feel better. It's never as bad as it seems. And I drew this. It's my, I don't know if you can see it. It's my Russian dolls on coffee version of how I felt this week. And so if you have anything that's been bothering you this week, just unpack it like you would unpack your Russian dolls, and everything is conquerable and nothing is unsurmountable. Thank you for letting us share it, Madalena.
That is such a perfect imagery. I think I'm just going to imagine doing that. Thank you, Sukriti. Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.